Catus, Maximus here, this time with a quick review of the ThruNite TN36 Super Flashlight. This happens to be the cool white version, but ThruNite does offer neutral white and cool white in all their mid-range and high-end flashlights, which not all companies do, so it's kind of nice if you just like a more traditional yellowish tint, or if you like the brighter white lights. This happens to be cool white once again because it's kind of like it better than the warm lights for me personally. This is the full kit. $175. I should say thank you to Steven at ThruNite. ThruNite's actually now sent me about $500 or $600 worth of flashlights. And this is actually one of the goals that I had. Is one, ThruNite was willing to... I get tons of flashlight offers, and I turn most of them down because they want to send me just their lowest end flashlights. So I just don't do it. ThruNite was willing to send me the mid-grade flashlights, so I said I'd start going for it. And so I shilled a few of their flashlights, and finally got to a point where I said, hey, I've done a lot of flashlight reviews. I appreciate them sending me expensive flashlights, but I really want one. The whole goal was to get one of these super flashlights, with all the other companies would just, you know, deny me right off the bat. And so I'm actually pretty happy about that. Excellent packaging here. And let's get this out of the way, but it is pretty good packaging. Once again, this is the full set. For like $120, you can get the light by itself. But once again, this is the whole kit. This is actually not a bad charger. And let's actually just cut out and talk about this charger and show you its operation right now. So here's the charger. It's working. You can actually select the current by just pressing the button. You can either select 500, half an amp, or 500 milliamps, or 1,000 milliamps. So it is pretty powerful because it's going to drive an amp out 4 bays, which isn't really too bad. It'll get the batteries charged in around, you know, if they're totally empty, about 3 hours. I should also mention that you have to press and hold the button for 10 seconds if you're using a ferrophosphate, a LiFePO 4. You press and hold it for 10 seconds, and then that tells it to switch to the slightly lower voltage of a LiFePO 4 battery. And as soon as these are done charging, I will see if it auto-detects these nickel metal hydrides, because it's supposed to be compatible with those as well. And I think it just does that essentially by detecting the much lower voltages and assuming that the volt, if it's around 1 volt or less, that it's way below what any lithium-ion battery would be, and therefore switches to the nickel metal hydride charging mode, which should be compatible with NiCads too. One last thing I forgot to mention is as it's ticking over, it tells you with the current, and I actually just, well, this is the voltage, and then it's 500 milliamp. I don't know why it says 02 and 04. What I am noticing is they're getting kind of warm at the 1,000 milliamp. So if you're charging this like in the sun or a hot garage or something, you probably want to leave it at the 500 milliamp charging rate, just so the batteries don't get quite as hot. But if it's cooler weather and the batteries aren't going to can get rid of their heat better, then I go with the 1,000 milliamp. Even though that's known as 1/3 C, which is 1,000 milliamps is actually, you know, a 3-hour charge. It's surprising how warm these are still getting. Although I believe part of the heat that's coming from these is the fact that the charger is also getting kind of warm when it was sitting there at the full output. So to maximize life, you're probably better off standing at the 500 milliamp. But it's nice that it does have a high power mode where if you're in a cooler environment, or if you just need to get the batteries charged as quickly as possible, that you have that option. Okay, I got everything charged up, but I did want to see if it was going to work on these nickel metal hydrides. These are actually 2100 milliamp ones. Pretty nice. Of course, this charger, especially the outboard cells, are designed for 18650s, or excuse me, 26650s. Okay, so it's telling me error. I've had trouble with these batteries before. I keep bumping. They really don't want to fit in that cell. Come on now. You really almost need 2 hands to get these going. They're that bad. That cell is charging. That cell is charging. So one of them wants to have an issue, but interestingly enough, it will automatically detect nickel metal hydride and NiCad. And then the thing that I've realized, what it's counting off here, we got voltage. That really is the output current. It's just 502 milliamps, and then I noticed it started dropping down. Oh yeah, so you can even dump 1 amp into one of these AA's. I mean, it's a couple hour charge, but they'll get pretty hot. That's a pretty fast charge, but I'm actually pretty surprised. It works better than the Night Core, which really wouldn't want to charge any of them. And this one that gets an error, you just need to connect it to another battery for a minute to bring its voltage up. I'm happy to see it's a universal charger, so it does give you a little more value kit. Anyway, that's the deal with the charger. Surprisingly enough, for the price difference, which is like around 50-60 bucks, including the four. These are actually surprising. These are indeed protected. I haven't read them or read all of it. They do go pretty low, 2.5 volt, but they are protected against overcharge and under discharge. So for that, once again, the extra 50-60 bucks, you're getting four 3100 amp hour 18650s fully protected, and a pretty high output 1000 milliamp per cell independent cell charger that's universally compatible with lithium ion, lithium ferrophosphate, LiFePO4, and NiCad nickel metal hydride, and it does a decent job of even auto detecting. So it's actually a substantial charger, pretty heavy to tell you the truth. And once again, it has large bays. I didn't show that in the other video. Let's pull out one of these. Now we'll just unscrew it this way. But it does properly hold 26 650s in the two outer bays. And I think that's what it's really designed to do, is just charge two 26 650s at a time. But I do appreciate that. Anyway, we got the light. They call this desert tan, but I think something got lost in translation, because this is a medium brown. This leather, medium brown. This Gerber, that's desert tan. So much more brown. They probably should adjust that a little bit, or a lot even. Anyway, instruction manual for the charger, one for the light. These are using Cree XHP 70.2s, which are rated for like 130 lumens. And I should start off, or I should say, this will hold its turbo mode for 5 to 10 minutes, but it'll get to, this thing will get to 175 degrees if you let it sit there. It's pretty crazy. It will get super hot if you run the turbo mode. I should talk about the lenses. It is a nice lens. They do have like an aluminum extra layer in there for artistic nature. I do kind of like the desert tan because it has the black ring and a black button, so I do like that. Pretty clicky button, a little bit larger, pretty easy to use. One thing that has confused me a little bit about ThruNite is, one, I kind of wish the modes would be different, but we'll talk about that in a second here. But what has confused me is they include a replacement button element. They don't tell you how you're supposed to unscrew that. I assume you use a pair of snap ring pliers, but it's always funny that they include a replacement part that's very difficult to actually replace. They do include a metal ring. What these rings are for is, even if they do chamfer this hole for the lanyard, what ends up happening is, as you carry it around, it will wear out the lanyard itself. So that's what the ring is for, is to prevent this little loop from getting chafed and worn out by this. Anyway, let's get the batteries in there. It is a threaded handle, but they do put Loctite on, so this bottom part doesn't come loose. You do have to remove the batteries in order to charge them in this unit. I kind of wish they would. They have something called a TN50 where they use the lithium-ion power brick, but I guess people complained about that. They did lube the O-ring properly. What I do find interesting, well, there's two things I find interesting. One, they actually anodize the internal components, but it's aluminum contacts. The one thing I can say about this battery carriage is it's a 4-post socket head cap screws. They appear to be stainless steel. This is a pretty nice battery carriage. You can see this PCB here is just really, come on camera, really surprisingly thick. Although I wish they would have gold plated. I guess they assume this terminal is gold plated, and it does just go through the outer ring and then the center terminal, so this can be flipped around. It's unidirectional. This is what would be considered a 14.4 volt nominal flashlight. Of course, it will work through the standard ranges all the way down from like 10 volts all the way up to 17 volts. But that's effectively what it is a 14.4 volt flashlight. I thought they would run that 7.2 volts, 2 batteries in parallel, 2 in series, but apparently it's just running them all in series. Let me show you that voltage. Here we go. Since these are fresh off the charger, they'll read a bit higher, but the center is positive. This outer ring is negative, and if we measure that, 16.68. So it's running them all in series. It's a pretty high voltage flashlight. And in case you're curious, what they do is let me get a, I don't know if I had a flashlight here. Oh, look, I do. They put a ridge or a step in the bottom of the can. That way there's no chance for the terminal to make contact. Anyway, slide it all in as a large cartridge and put it together. And you have a chunky soda can, pop can flashlight. That's exactly what these are known as. And it's really true. What I mean by that is here we have a can of the choice of the new generation. Always get the real sugar, never get the high fructose corn syrup stuff. But you can see here, maybe you can't unless I zoom back just a little bit. This is literally about the size. The lens, that end's about the same diameter as a soda can. It's a little bit taller. It's actually heavier than a can of soda. Okay, we'll go outside in just a second here. It does prevent rolling around because of this big button hump. I guess prevents its rolling, but it might have been nice to have a hex. One thing I will comment on is just perfect, excellent, deep knurling. I actually like knurling on flashlights, and this is pretty good. The button hump is pretty large, so it's actually pretty easy to find this. Because the darn thing gets so hot, I wish they would have put deeper and, you know, heavier duty heat sinks on them. One thing I will mention is this would be considered a true floodlight searchlight. And the obvious nature of that is, like on this, both of these lights, actually, as a matter of fact, all three of these lights use Cree XHP 70Bs. But this one has a deeper lens, so it's going to offer you more focus. The reflector, these are a bit shallower. So it's more like three of these TN30s all together. It's a little bit more focused. They are a little bit bigger than what's on the TN30, but this offers a whole lot of splash. It has so many lumens that its hotspot still outshines this 4000 lumen TC20 V2 just because it has triple the LEDs. And real fast, why this isn't 12,000 lumens, triple what this is, I believe, got some particles, is just simply the fact that they're using 18650s, and they're actually, since they're running them in series, they're running into current limitations, where this is a 26650 light. The argument being that this probably should have been a 10.8 volt 3 by 26650 light instead of 4 18650s. That probably been wiser. Probably would have made this barrel a little bit bigger in diameter, and that was probably the battle, is to use 4 18650s or 3 26650s. You would have been better off with the 26650s because this would have been a 12,000 lumen light. But for the compromise, now this is not you're not going to toss this in your back pocket. It's not an everyday carry. But this is a great emergency light. You probably could set a piece of paper or some brush on fire with this. That's what, when you start getting to 10,000 plus real lumens, right about there, it's starting to actually burn my hand. This isn't feeling heat on my hand. This is burning your hand to the intensity of the light. A couple quick light pattern tests and we'll go outside. Anyway, here's the TH30, which has a really wide. And then, see, this is a bit tighter. And then if we go with the TC20 V2, we can see that that's much more of a spot. This will show it. The spot on this is just a bit tighter than it is on this, even though this has so many lumens. And to show people what the difference between warm white and cool white is, this is considered warm white, cool white. I don't know how well the camera picks that up. Anyway, I think we should go outside and see how this does. I mean, that's what this really is this would be just a great searchlight, just because it's just throwing out so much light. It's crazy. Make sure that's nice and tight. There we go. Make sure you got that tight so it gets maximum contact. And, okay, let's go check this out. All right, so we do have a Firefly mode, which is essentially this, just 3 lumens, super dim. And then it does have variable output. It is not as smooth as the Soferns at all, and it cycles, so it'll go up and down. So if we press and hold, it will slowly get brighter to its 8,000 lumens, flash, and then if you continue to hold it, it'll just ramp back down and flash again. And I wish it would just stop at the top and bottom. As far as turbo, it is quite bright, but what you can see is, I'm going to hold the flashlight straight, you can just see how wide the beam is. So this is like a super floodlight, so you don't get as much throw as you'd think for 11,000 lumens, because they have such shallow reflectors that you just get this ultra wide beam. So hiking through the woods, it would just light up absolutely everything. But I would prefer a little bit more focus, just a bit deeper reflectors, or maybe leave them shallow and not have the orange peel. Here we have the TC20 V2, which has a deeper, still orange peel reflector, and you can see that it lights up those trees almost as well as this, but doesn't quite have as much splash, much narrower. Now if we go back to the TN36 here, let me put this away. Here we have the TN36, there's the button. Once again, you can see that it actually doesn't light those trees up any better than a light that's only 4,000 lumens, but we can see it is just super bright across the entire field. That's where all that extra photons are going. So as you can see, it's super bright, but they should not have used orange peel. Those should have just been smooth reflectors, so it had a bit more throw. Having all these extra lumens but be dedicated into flood, you know, unless you really want a very wide, true flood hand flashlight, I do wish it had just a bit more throw. But I think this is the antithesis. They have a TN42, which is like a light cannon spotlight, and so this is essentially the opposite of that. And I don't know if I can show that. It also does not have an electronic lockout, and if this somehow got double pressed, well, it's not super easy, but if it somehow got double pressed in the backpack on turbo mode, it would start a fire, just straight up. And if I turn this on here, you can almost, I wonder which way you can see it. You can see almost a hue on the lens. It's not properly cleaned. There's some kind of film, and it's on the back side of the glass. So I haven't been able to clean that up. So they could do a better job. Actually, all the other ThruNites have had perfectly clear lenses, so something must have happened during the washing process on this one. Other than that, it's really not a bad flashlight. And these things, there are, surprisingly enough, there are cheaper 10,000 lumen, 11,000 lumen flashlights. Ones that are a lot cheaper, but it's, unfortunately, they are don't quite meet their output levels. This one really does meet its output level. And this would be essentially a great searchlight, because it just throws floods out such a wide area that if you actually do search and rescue or that type of stuff, it would be a viable option, just because it throws out a huge amount of light over a wide area, allowing you to cover and see a much wider area. Even then, it could use just a little bit more throw. Other than that, besides the lockout, the only other thing is I wish they would have put more of a chamfer here, so this ring would lay a little bit flatter. Sometimes when you put it into the holster, this thing flips up, and you can see, and it gets really caught and makes it difficult to put it in its little protective pouch. And even though this is not desert sand or desert tan, it's a medium brown, I don't mind the colors of this. I don't mind the medium brown at all, and I kind of like the black accents. Besides that, 120 for the unit by itself, or 175 for the whole kit. It is pretty expensive. It is built pretty well, but they do need to add a couple of options, and I think they once again could use a smooth instead of an orange peel reflector, so it has a bit more throw. And finally, it would be nice if they did something like just a regular barrel plug charger, but still have the ability, but still have it use the battery cartridge and just easily replaceable 18650s, but still have some way of charging the batteries while they're sitting in the light, even if it's a full external power brick and not like a USB-C port or something, because it does get a little bit annoying every time you want to recharge it, that you have to unscrew it, pull out all the batteries, and screw it all back in again. And that's actually their idea. Their idea of locking it out is just unscrewing it some so that it doesn't operate. But for a light like this, it's not something you would really want to remember. You just always have it together nice and tight, so it really should have the electronic lockout. Anyway, I should say thank you to ThruNite for sending me this kind of pricey flashlight, that's for sure. But nonetheless, I think these things are amazing. To tell you the truth, nowadays you can get just a soda can sized flashlight that is, I mean, it's going to be brighter than most car headlights, that's for sure. And if you have halogens, this would be crazy. It would be like your headlights weren't even turned on when you activated this thing. Just remember, this thing gets really hot, and that's part of the problem why people have battery failures, and it's part of it's due to the manufacturers. The fact that they have a light like this, the fact that they're using Crees that are rated for 85 degrees Celsius. So what they do is they set the temperature sensor to start ramping down to 80 degrees. Mind you, 80 degrees Celsius is 175 degrees Fahrenheit, and there was a YouTube video where somebody measured that temperature after sitting. It would do it for like 10 minutes, but even the lower housing was like 140 degrees. And that ruins batteries, and that causes our early failure of the LEDs. So they really should have a lot more heat sinking on it. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody watching and subscribing. If you haven't subscribed, please do. Till next time, Catus Maximus out.